All right, good morning. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining today. Going to go ahead and kick things off. So thanks for joining the this part of the Craggin Classic Digital Series. My name is Alex. I'm the program manager at Rocky Mountain Field Institute. My pronouns are he, his, him, and a couple of ground rules for participation. This is a great opportunity to include all folks from all different backgrounds, ages, and climbing abilities. So really psyched to have everyone participating. We want to make sure that this is a respectful and safe place to have a chat and learn some things about Shelf Road. Cool. So, of course, keep an eye on all the great things that are happening at the Craggin Classic at cragginclassic.com. There's over $15,000 in gear giveaways, so be sure to be checking that out, monitoring that on that website. Just going to go ahead and kick things off here. Great. So like I mentioned, my name is Alex. I work for Rocky Mountain Field Institute. So we are a local 501c nonprofit dedicated to the stewardship of public lands in southern Colorado. The three primary pillars of our mission are stewardship, education, and research. So stewardship is on the ground trail and restoration work that we complete in the Pikes Peak region. We accomplish this through our paid crews, as well as engaging thousands of volunteers every single year on those public lands to help them get better invested in the natural world and caring for the places that give us so much. Education, so we do a lot of different programming, everything from informal tidbits out on the trail, talking about geology, ecology, multitude of other topics to get people more connected with the natural world. And lastly, research, monitoring the efficacy of our work to always be improving our science-based solutions that we implement out in the field. Cool. So a little bit of a roadmap for this presentation and this workshop here. So my goal here is for y'all to leave with a better sense of place of Shelf Road and the broader scope of Fremont County and how Shelf Road kind of fits into that history. So we'll be talking a little bit about the geologic history, talk a little bit about the formations that we climb on, how those were formed, which have a little bit about the human history, so initial interface with folks all the way up to modern times. And then we'll go ahead and talk a bit about current issues at Shelf Road and ways that you can get involved, and then open it up for Q&A at the end. So let's start at the beginning of time, beginning of geologic time. So for perspective, the Earth's history, if you were to compare that to 50 yards on a football field, human existence really is only an inch within the goal line. So we have really not been around for very long at all. A lot of the formations that we see in the Fremont County area, and specifically at Shelf Road, are over 400,000 million years old, some of them bordering closer to 500,000. And we do have some rock that's actually closer to 1.7 billion years old. So let's go ahead and chat a little bit about those different layers. So let's talk about the layer that we're the most psyched on that makes that great limestone, those pockets that we love pulling on, and those crimps, and just sending the gnar at Shelf. So right about 485 million years ago, during the Ordovician period, Fremont limestone was formed basically by deposits of ancient creatures, a large amount of invertebrates, shell-type creatures, jawless fish. Those basically settled to the floor of a shallow inland sea that was basically getting deeper at the time, and basically settled and was buried. And then over time, with heat and pressure, it formed the dolomitic limestone that we climb on today. A really interesting thing about the Fremont limestone, it is a dolomitic limestone. So it's actually infused with a manganese. And that's actually what makes it more durable and harder than your typical limestone. So it's good for us. Those holes are going to last a little bit longer. And of course, those bolts will hopefully stay a bit longer as well as we're taking those fat whips. Cool. So a couple other layers to chat about here. So we have the Harding sandstone. This was basically a pretty neat area where we had the jawless fish frequenting the area, and there's actually been some pretty significant fossil discoveries I'll cover here in a bit. But yeah, very significant for that component. Also, I do want to mention the Precambrian gneiss that you can see along 4 Mile Creek. That stuff is actually the very same rock that you'll see in the Black Canyon, and that is actually some of what we call basement rock. So it's over 1.7 billion years old and is really only exposed in very, very particular circumstances where you have, high force of erosion and very specific tectonic uplifts. So that's really why we are able to see that there. There's 4 Mile Creek there, so that channel has helped carve that waterway, so has exposed some of that really neat metamorphic rock that you see also in the Black Canyon. So here's another, just a couple quick shots of the rocks that we were talking about. So here, kind of up top, there are some volcanic activity, and actually this is kind of closer to the mountain towns of Cripple Creek and Victor, and that's really what helped create some of the ores and the very beneficial minerals that drove mining in those communities. Again, we have the Fremont limestone here. We have the Harding sandstone below. And then here's a great example you can view. This is from a work day along the gym area in 2019. This granite here, that metamorphic gneiss, is what I was speaking about with that older Precambrian rock. Cool. Just a couple other quick things about the rock, more on like a minute microscopic type level. So something that's very unique to Shelf Road and limestone in general are the pockets. So the pockets are formed actually through a chemical form of erosion. So as water interacts with weak spots in that rock, it actually breaks down that material. And then it's further along a little bit by mechanical forces, but it's primarily chemical. So that's something that's very unique to the sedimentary type of rock that we have here that we're looking at and we climb on. The other features are primarily created by mechanical forces of erosion. So cross wedging with water and ice, sandblasting, so wind picking up little particles and actually blasting the face, that over time actually does exfoliate the rock and helps create some of the more smaller features that you might see. So those crimps, those gas stones, things like that are more a result of mechanical types of erosion. Cool. So let's jump into the human history a little bit here. So definitely want to acknowledge the indigenous folks who were here before us, and this is their ancestral lands. We had a multitude of different tribes that were out here in the Fremont County area. So for reference, Fremont County encompasses, Florence, Canyon City, and Shelf Road, and a little bit north of Shelf Road there in Cripple Creek. So really want to pay our respects and recognize that multiple tribes were here before European settlers, and just mention a couple of the tribes here. So at some point or another, as early as the 1500s, we had the Cheyenne people, Arapaho, Kiowa, Comanche, Blackfoot, Lakota, all inhabited the area, but primarily the Utes were the ones who were out here first and had that really long-lasting presence. So that graphic in the left-hand corner there, that shows their hunting territory and general territory before colonialism, and then the very unfortunate sequestering of their lands to those very small areas within Colorado and Utah and present day. So looking ahead here a little bit, just want to say, Ute does mean land of the sun. So I think that's kind of a really neat takeaway too, as far as learning their language, learning and finding ways to pay that respect. Really, they suffered the most of the basically being forced out of their lands during the end of the United States victory over the Mexican-American War in 1848, and that's really where folks started to kind of come out here. So let's talk about the initial wave of early European exploration. So very kind of early as the 1600s, we had Spanish explorers coming through here. One notable particular expedition led by Francisco Coronado. They came through Fremont County. Didn't really see what they were looking for silver and other minerals. So they just kind of kept going on and checking out other places. Fast forward to the early 1800s, we started seeing other expeditions. For example, Zebulon Pike came out with a federally commissioned expedition to check out the region, and he actually had a camp at present-day Canyon City near the Royal Gorge. At this point in history, things were really confined to trade between some of the early folks and then also with the native tribes and some minor agriculture. So jump to the mid-1800s, we start really seeing a huge pickup of European activity, and this is primarily due to the Pikes Peak Gold Rush, also known as the Colorado Gold Rush. Folks were coming out, trying to strike it rich, happy, looking for gold. So hopefully looking to find that strike it rich and stake their claim. So we had a really big influx at that point in time. Canyon City was founded in 1860, mainly to explore some of the potential for mining and exploiting oil and coal reserves in the area, but it soon became a really important transportation and supply hub for the mining towns that were starting to spring up in the area. Also note in the, so actually I'll quickly say the middle photo is a shot of Canyon City as it kind of used to look. There on the right-hand side, that is going to be Kit Carson, as well as his buddy, John Fremont. So they were actually teaming up to do the first geological survey of the area, really with a big eye toward trying to find the best paths for railroad tracks, which is soon to come and really change the landscape of the area. Also of note, the history of prisons in Canyon City and Fremont County is really prevalent. As soon as 1871, the first prison was formed there, Colorado Territory Prison, with a shot of that in the lower right-hand corner. And even today, we have over a dozen in Fremont County, with an example of one of the complexes as seen today, pictured in the left. Also during this time, it's pretty freaking sweet. They discovered a lot of really interesting fossils. This was the site really of multiple, actually very groundbreaking discoveries in the world of paleontology. So here's a couple examples. I mentioned that jawless fish earlier, so that's going to be that photo on the lower left-hand side. So that's what was found in that Harding Sandstone Formation. Pretty darn neat stuff. This is actually the first vertebrate creature that was on record for a time. Another one was discovered, but this is still one of the oldest vertebrates on record. Cool. Also, the Stegosaurus was discovered actually on the way into Shelf Road. So if you're cruising in from Canyon City on Field, hopping on Highway 9, actually on your way out just past the timber mill, as you kind of start getting into the canyon, there's a few quarries there, and there's a spot called Garden Park Fossil Area. And that's actually where they found 3 Stegosaurus fossils that we've all become so familiar with today, discovered by Mr. Marsh. There's actually a really good drunk history on the kind of feuds between Marsh and one of his colleagues, and it does mention some of his discoveries in Canyon City. So kind of a fun thing if you're into this sort of thing. And of course, the Allosaurus was also discovered in the area, which is that dinosaur in the lower right-hand side. Jump into the late 1800s. So a couple really big things here. So mining really was kind of small scale until the early to mid 1870s, and that's when the railroad started to really change the landscape and the ability for the place to become much more industrial. So William Jackson Palmer, the founder of Colorado Springs, also owner of the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad, was able to build a track to Coal Creek in Fremont County and eventually build a track through the Royal Gorge. So this really helped connect the mining towns to the Arkansas Valley, and the Arkansas Valley to the Front Range and other communities in the area. Gold was discovered in Cripple Creek actually not until the late 1980s, like 1989 or so. So this is actually pretty significant because This is actually the site of the most lucrative gold mine in Colorado's history. Essentially, over 100 or 21 million ounces of gold were found there, and really, with that, it necessitated a channels needing to be made between Cripple Creek and the Arkansas Valley. So that is why Shelf Road was actually built. It was built as a route for those miners and folks who were trying to get out to Cripple Creek or back to Canyon City. Actually used to be a toll road, pretty neat. Here's a shot of what it used to look like on the left-hand side there. So it used to cost about $1.75 for a 6-horse stagecoach, and then about 30 cents for a person and his horse. And you can actually see the old toll keeper's cabin from places on Cactus Cliff, Spiny Ridge, and the gym. So if you kind of look skiers left, there's a big meadow there to the left of Shelf Road, and you can kind of see here in this lower photo, we have that footprint of the old toll keeper's cabin. So that individual had to schlep his or her way up the hill and collect the money every time someone was coming through. So pretty neat stuff. Pretty neat stuff there. Awesome. So in the 1900s, really started to see a shift to more industrial agriculture. Some pipelines were built, more advanced irrigation systems. So that was able to kind of further diversify the area's economy. And tourism really started to blow up at the Royal Gorge. So the Royal Gorge certainly has attracted folks for a long time. Indigenous people certainly was important to them. And then also, with the railroads, that was also attracting folks. But the suspension bridge built in the 1930s actually really propelled that additional visitation. Cool. And then, of course, some popular Western movies started to get filmed in the 1970s, like John Wayne movies and that type of thing. So several movies were actually shot in the area of that time. So today, really, the economy certainly is still very much tourism based with the Royal Gorge, rafting, climbing, getting out there for sure. But also there's the penitentiaries and that sort of thing that also drives the local economy. So we've gotten a good general history of the area. So let's talk a little bit about climbing specifically. So climbing culture in Colorado had been growing really for decades before the discovery of shelf. Really intensive development in the South Platte, the Front Range area, Boulder area, Western Slope by folks like Clayton Core, Jimmy Dunn, Brian Becker and the Black Canyon. So a lot of traditional type development for many decades in Colorado. Very much sticking to that traditional style of ground up using removable protection and crack systems with really not leaving any anchors and that sort of thing. It wasn't until the late 70s, early 80s that initial inquiry to shelf began. Harvey Carver was certainly bopping around all over the place and climbing all kinds of stuff. But it wasn't until about that time that he started to pass along his knowledge about shelf to other folks in the area. Initial development at shelf was very much still in the traditional style, still sticking to crack systems and sticking to, using nuts and cams that were still in their infancy at that point. But, sticking to that type of style. Pretty soon, folks started to look to the panels between the cracks, and initially some of the bolting was still done ground up with hooks and other aid methods. But pretty soon, folks started to get that influence from European countries who were exploring the vertical faces and overhanging faces of limestone and starting to put in, bolts with powered hammer drills. So folks started to warm up to that and started to embrace this top-down style. So with that, you're putting in your anchor points up top, you're rehearsing a route, you're figuring out the best places to put a protection point, place your bolt at a good stance, a good grip, just making for a quality route. Very much so, even with the top-down routes that were first established, on Cactus Cliff, Spiny Ridge, the Dark Side, the bank, a lot of those have some pretty pretty far bolt spacings by some of the other more modern standards, and you can definitely feel, you can kind of feel that style and the influence from the first ascensionists with that, really earning your clips for sure. And there's some really good classic lines, absolutely. So yeah, that first wave, definitely seeing that. Climber doesn't really fall as much, and definitely seeing that. Around this time, the mid 1980s, we saw some of the first kind of conflicts between private landowners and climbers. So as folks were getting out there and drilling their lines and working routes, a rancher came up and spoke with a few of the climbers and um, basically, asked them to politely not be on his property. And so that pushed development more into the bank area. Saw a huge surge of development over the past 4 decades. And really, we've seen a huge change in the type of hardware that's used, the bolting style. So, we definitely have more generously bolted routes now for folks who might be leading at their limit or just getting into the sport. So, shelf has quickly become, over the past several decades, 4 decades or so, that it's been frequented, very, very popular for climbers of all abilities. You couple that with the great temperatures, and it's no mystery why it's become such a favorite crag in Colorado. So with that being said, I really do want to talk about what makes Shelf Road particularly special and essentially one of the best managed climbing areas within the country, arguably and definitely within Colorado. And really, the reason for this is because climbers started out as early as the mid 1980s, and having conversations with private landowners, having conversations with the Bureau of Land Management. And I can't speak highly enough of the folks from the BLM Royal Gorge Field office. They are amazing folks. In my personal experience of working with them. But just initially, during the initial conversations, they were putting in the work to grade the roads out to Shelf Road and trying to think long-term plans and how could they be accommodating to climbers specifically. And that mentality is certainly carried to present day with the folks that I've worked with. So Riffy's been operating there since the early 1990s. Actually kind of shifted from more of a climbing guide-based organization from what it used to be in the 80s, used to be known as the American Mountain Foundation, but has transitioned to a stewardship organization with heavy and strong roots in climbing access. And Shelf Road was one of the first sites and is one of our legacy sites. So that's really a big contribution there. Was the founder, climber mountaineer Marquez. He saw the impacts that were starting to occur at places like Shelf Road, occur at places like Indian Creek, and he was super proactive in mobilizing his friends, the climbing community, and helping to facilitate that relationship with other nonprofits, the land manager, and private landowners. A huge shout out to Access Fund as they acquired 115 acres of privately owned land, which encompassed, Cactus Cliff, Spiny Ridge, part of the gym, vault, gem wall, cache wall. All of that was thanks to the Access Fund's hard work in acquiring those crags and then handing those over to the BLM for future climbing access and management. Another huge shout out to the Pikes Peak Climbers Alliance. They do a lot of great work in the area. Actually, just last year, in collaboration with BBC, Boulder Climbing Community, they were out there replacing bolts at the dark side, and they've also played a hand in trail work as well. And they're just a great organization for also helping to fundraise for a lot of the infrastructure improvements. So, just within this last year, the BLM has spent over $425,000 worth of improvements, and the PPCA definitely helped with some of that fundraising. So as a result, in the Bank campground alone, 20 new campsites were added. An additional group site was added with the host site and a couple more vault toilets. So as y'all are likely familiar, Shelf Road certainly during peak season is the bank lots could definitely get really, really overcrowded. So they also improve the parking lot a bit. But all of this extra infrastructure is going a long way to helping make sure that we can continue using this area in a sustainable manner. Also, really big shout out to the American Alpine Club for hosting us at this Craggin Classic virtual event, and then also, of course, for collaborating with us last year. We hosted a volunteer day in collaboration with them and PPCA, doing some trail work and stuff, and running Leave No Trace workshops and that sort of thing. So really big shout out to them and everything that they do for Shelf Road and all the other climbing advocacy that American Alpine Club does. So huge shout out to them for sure. Here's an example of some of the work that was completed last year. So this is the ejection seat area. So you can see we built a pretty fatty retaining wall and multiple belay platforms to make that a bit more sustainable, as that was getting pretty eroded out. So great collaboration there, good example. As far as challenges today, really we're seeing a lot of visitation. Word's been out about Shelf for a long time. More and more guidebooks continue to get published. More routes are getting established, and there's plenty of moderates out there. So we're going to continue to see a larger surge of climbers, especially as more and more people get into the sport. And we can definitely see that popularity in Colorado Springs alone. It was only a handful of years ago or so that we had one climbing gym in the Springs, and then now we have over 3, we have 4 gyms. So really good indication that there is that market for it, and we're going to continue to see folks going from gym to crag for sure. I'd say replacing old hardware is something that also needs to be on everybody's mind, and just being mindful of that. So, supporting folks like Pikes Peak Climbers Alliance and getting that hardware replaced. And very, very importantly here, and it's just been such a tough year in so many ways, but we definitely as climbers need to be as inclusive as possible to BIPOC communities, as well as folks that are within the LGBTQ communities as well. So really call to action for all that are on the presentation here. A couple of different things you could do. Definitely get out and volunteer with Renfee or any of the other nonprofits that were mentioned. Look for volunteer opportunities. Specifically, with Rocky Mountain Field Institute, we'll be back out there next year. Typically run volunteer days in the fall. So if you want to come out, wrestle a couple rocks, get them into place, build some steps, and then also, make some time to climb after work, or come out for the weekend and climb one day and do some, trail work the other day, that would be fantastic. Had some folks from American Alpine Club and PPCA out during one of the last volunteer days we had there in September. And of course, practicing Leave No Trace ethics. So, educate yourself on these 7 principles. Really important, especially at heavily used areas where we need to be respectful of other visitors and other climbers, being respectful of wildlife, traveling and camping on durable surfaces, planning ahead and preparing, and all the good things that go with that type of mentality. You can certainly become a master educator, an L&T trainer. Those are really great ways to promote those ethics, but it's really as simple as attending a workshop or just quickly perusing through their website. There's plenty of climber-specific type L&T deals, and Renfee does run those during our volunteer work days out at Shelf. Cool. Also, donating to invested partners that I mentioned earlier. Everyone plays a role in taking care of Shelf and other climbing areas. So find those areas that you're really psyched in, and if you don't have time to volunteer, certainly a small donation goes a long way to leveraging resources and getting things done. And of course, last but not least, educating yourself with diversity, equity, and inclusion. So yeah, folks, that is what I got for you. I'd be more than happy to take a quick Q&A here. Just jump that there. Okay. Let's see. I'm seeing a question from Sarah Wolf here. I have not seen any concerns about the BLM losing property as of late. I could certainly look into that a bit further. I'll be more than happy to chat with you. But yeah, as far as my interactions with them, they've definitely prioritized keeping the climbing access that is there open. Cool. Any other questions? All right, folks. Well, hey, thanks for joining. I really appreciate y'all for hanging out for a little bit. Hope you learned a couple things, and really appreciate you for being here. Hope the rest of the series treats you well. Be well, stay safe. Yeah, take care.